So about a week ago, I filmed this video, sent it off to the sponsor for approval, and it was all about how Apple needed to make 2023 a massive year for the Mac. And then on Monday, they did exactly that, which makes most of this video completely pointless. Or does it? Right, so rather than completely reshoot this video and start from scratch, I'm going to show you what I shot before Apple did their big announcement about the M2 Pro, M2 Max, the new Mac Mini, the new MacBook Pro, and let's see how accurate my wishes were. This could be quite interesting. Right, before we get started, just a very quick word from today's sponsor, which is Trend Micro and their fantastic Cleaner One Pro. This is a sponsored video, which is why I had to film it a week or so ago, but let's get this bit done. When I first got that 24-inch iMac that I mentioned a moment ago, about 2 weeks later I ran Cleaner One Pro on it and it found 2 gig of unused files, stuff I just didn't need. And that is one of the best features it offers. It finds those massive files, great big video files, audio files, stuff that you've downloaded or didn't even know was there at all, and it identifies it and lets you delete it straight away. That isn't all it does. There's loads of features in Cleaner One Pro. I'm a big fan of their duplicate photos feature. If you're like me, you'll take lots of the same photo by mistake, and with Cleaner One Pro you can find those duplicates and remove them very quickly. There's a startup manager, which is better than the one built into macOS. There's a proper app manager for fully removing apps from your Mac, which Apple has never made easy. And there's even a file shredder, which helps you get rid of files completely. Oh, and we shouldn't forget the little toolbar that you can have at the top of the screen that monitors things like your CPU, your memory, and all sorts of really important stuff about your Mac. Cleaner One Pro is absolutely fantastic. Trend Micro have been a long-term supporter of this channel. I love their software. I love them. I think you might as well. Go and check it out with the link in the description. First up on my Mac wish list for 2023 is the Apple silicon-based Mac Pro. Apple didn't release a new Mac Pro this week, so this bit is still relevant. And just to reiterate, I don't need one of these at all. I wouldn't know how to use it. I couldn't even use the Intel version that's out there already. But I am fascinated to see what Apple does with the next generation Mac Pro. And we know it's coming because they mentioned it unusually in the Mac Studio launch event back in March last year. And they wouldn't go back on their word, would they? I guess that there are lots of people out there waiting for this new Mac Pro. I don't know what they do with this stuff. It's mind-boggling. It's way beyond my capabilities, but there must be people eagerly awaiting a Apple silicon-based Mac Pro. The big question is going to be how powerful will it be? And there have been some rather worrying reports from Mark Gurman, who's an Apple leaker, if you weren't aware. He is telling us that apparently Apple has scrapped the top-tier configuration of that next Mac Pro. And that was going to be a computer that you could spec up ridiculously for, again, I have no idea what purpose, but apparently, according to Gurman, Apple is starting to, well, they may already have gone back on that idea, simply because the costs and resources required to build that particular high-spec Mac Pro just don't make sense. So if that top-end Mac Pro is not going to be a thing, that leaves us apparently with a Mac Pro that can be spec'd up still pretty impressively, but it's going to max out with a maximum amount of unified memory of 192 gigabytes. Now that is still shed loads of memory, but it's quite a bit south of the current 1 terabyte that you can configure on the Intel version. From my point of view, completely selfishly as a commentator on this sort of stuff, it's going to be a real popcorn moment when that thing arrives. My next request for the Mac this year is a completely unhindered next version of the 14-inch MacBook Pro. So they did release a new 14-inch MacBook Pro this week. Is it unhindered? Well, we don't know because no one's really had one yet. I certainly haven't got mine yet. I will be getting it at the start of February. I'll report back. But let's find out why I'm going to the 14-inch from the 16-inch. Now, in a recent video, which I'll link to above, I spoke about my 16-inch MacBook Pro, which is the M1 Max version, which is a fantastic machine, the best, most powerful laptop I've ever owned, but it's just too heavy. I'm doing more traveling now, and I just can't be bothered to take that planet-sized laptop to coffee shops, on trains, on planes. It's just too unwieldy. So I have my sights set on a 14-inch MacBook Pro, and rather than go for the current version, I'm going to go for either a M2 Pro or M2 Max, if that's what they're called, version when hopefully it drops in March. So it didn't drop in March, it dropped in January, cheers Tim, and I've gone for the M2 Max version of the 14-inch MacBook Pro. I've spec'd it up to 32GB of unified memory, 2TB SSD. Basically, it matches my 16-inch MacBook Pro because I want to see how far the Max version of these chips has come. Fingers crossed. Don't really want any kind of design update or anything like that at all, because these new MacBook Pros, well, they're not new anymore, but these MacBook Pros that were launched in October 2021 are fantastic machines. The only request I have is for Apple to not rush them out. Apparently, these new M2 Pro and M2 Max chips are going to be the first to be built on a 3nm process. They weren't. So the M2 chips, these new M2 chips, are built on a 5nm process, which isn't as good as a 3nm process. What this means in reality, we have no idea. Max Tech are worried. I need convincing, but yeah, we'll see. Next up, can we please have an update to the fantastic Mac Mini? We got one! This is the M1 version, and as I mentioned at the start of this video, it's going into a mini music production studio in this studio. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the updates on that. This chassis has been around for ages, and it does have some issues relating to Bluetooth, but regardless of that, it just needs a bit of an update. I'd love to see a thinner profile. It doesn't need to be this thick. Apple Silicon is so efficient. This is just too big these days, even though it's still quite small. Imagine a smaller, thinner version of this in iMac colours. That would be so cool. That would be cool, but we didn't get it. So we didn't get new colours. The M2 Mac Mini looks just like the M1 Mac Mini. Does that mean we'll still get the Bluetooth issues? I'll find out for you. But yeah, it looks the same, which is a bit of a disappointment, really. The only thing left to do then would be to put faster chips in it. Now, at the moment, this is a very quick machine. It does amazing things it shouldn't be able to do given its price. But you imagine an M2 Pro and M2 Max chip in a redesigned Mac Mini. So we did get new chips. We got the M2, the standard M2, which is basically a M2 MacBook Air in a Mac Mini form. And then we got the M2 Pro. That is the one I think that most people are fascinated by. We didn't get the M2 Max in the Mac Mini. With hindsight, that was never going to happen, really. The standard M2 is the one that I'm getting just to see how it compares with the previous generation. I am tempted to then go for the M2 Pro. So subscribe not to miss that content. The next Mac request I have for 2023 is something that's grown on me recently. It wasn't something I'd considered at all until a few people started mentioning it in my comments. And that's a 15-inch version of the M2 MacBook Air. This wasn't mentioned either, so this is completely relevant and very interesting. That isn't a laptop that I need myself. I'd still review it, obviously. Clearly, a lot of people want it. I can see Apple doing it in 2023. And the reason for that's quite simple. Under Tim Cook's reign, they do seem quite inclined to pack each of the product lines with loads of different variants. Look at the iPad, for instance. There are loads of different iPads that you can buy now. Too many in my book. I also like the idea of a much smaller, thinner version of the 16-inch MacBook Pro. I know it wouldn't be as powerful as that, but the idea of having a bigger screened Apple laptop that doesn't break your back is quite tempting. Lastly, I would love to see an updated 24-inch iMac. We didn't get that either this week, which is good for me because this part of the video is still relevant, but it's a shame because I do think we should have an M2 iMac by now. Where is it, Tim? I love that machine. My base model version, even though it doesn't get a huge amount of use these days, did spend a lot of time in my kitchen about a year ago, and I really put it to task back then. But weirdly, it wasn't updated last year. It didn't get the M1 Pro and M1 Max, and there's not been really any rumours about it being updated at all. So we've got two scenarios here. The first one's rather unpalatable, which is that the 24-inch iMac hasn't sold very well, and Apple is consequently thinking about ditching it. The second scenario, which is much more promising to be honest, is that they are waiting for the M2 Pro and M2 Max chips. I do think we need to see some kind of significant spec update for that 24-inch iMac this year, but I'm sorry, I don't think we'll see the big version. I've got a feeling it's going to be a good year for the Mac in 2023. Right, we'll stop it there. That wasn't too bad. I'm actually fairly pleased with my predictions, and I got some of it right, I got some of it wrong. Who cares? All I care about now is what you think. So let me know in the comments, what did you think to Apple's M2 launches this week? And more importantly, what are you going to buy? Or what are you still waiting for? And if you've still got some time and you want to see my full reaction to the M2 Pro, the M2 Max, the new Mac Mini, and the new MacBook Pros, keep watching for a link to that video.